Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat. I'm Tim Harlow. I'm from Templeton and Partners. I'm the CRO here, and we are a global DEI-focused IT solutions provider, providing expertise to companies around the world. And I'm very pleased to be your host for today's session. Whether you're joining us from London, like today with Pravina and myself, or from the US, Kay is in Austin right now, or from other parts of our global contacts, India, Spain, Switzerland, Netherlands, and across Europe. We're delighted to have you all here. And we have a fascinating chat ahead of us today, because joining me are two, I call them powerhouses in the tech world. I hope I don't embarrass you too much, but these two individuals have a very strong focus on AI and digital transformation. I have Pravina Ladva with us, the Chief Digital and Technology Officer from Swiss Re, and Kay Firth Butterfield, the Chief AI Ethics Officer and founder of Good Tech Advisory. Pravina has an extensive career in the reinsurance industry and joined in 2017 as CTO, I believe, and has since progressed through the ranks at Swiss Re to be the Group Digital and Chief Digital and Technology Officer right now, and has got some great experience of our topic today of AI in the digital transformation space, but also is very active in and around the women in tech topic, as well as we will be talking about a little bit later on today. And I believe also does some great mentoring work, which is a topic I think we'd like to discuss as well today. Kay is the CEO of Good Tech Advisory and also winner of the 2024 Time 100 Impact Award, which is again an outstanding accolade for some of the great work that she's doing in and around the topic of AI, and certainly around the topic of the ethics in the AI sector, which is something we'll be touching upon too. And a barrister, a former judge, and a professor as well. So we're in very good company today. During our session, we're going to talk a little bit about career insights, and I'd like to hear a little bit more, if we can, about some of those career journeys and insights maybe into your current roles and what you're doing in our tech sphere at the moment. We would like to talk about inclusion in the tech space. We know we're in a fast-paced world of technology, but how is inclusion helping us to impact the way that we work? I think is a topic which is very on point right now, and something which you have great experience of as well. So talking about inclusion and moving into women in tech, it's Women in History Month. We've recently had International Women's Day as well. So I think timing is good to really look at some first-hand experiences that you may have had about navigating the tech industry as a lady as well. So we'll be talking about that. And of course, on the technical side, we are looking to examine the role of AI within reinsurance and how we see that affecting our journey in the coming years and months, and particularly as well looking at some of the ethical applications of AI and how we think that can support tech for commercial success. So understanding how the digital solutions drive commercial success with that focus on AI will be something we talk about as well. And finally, digital trust. This is a big topic right now. Kay and I were just talking about that earlier, so delving into the importance of digital trust and how we gain access to the right data for decision making rather than just the data available. So we have a nice session, I think, ahead of us today with some really interesting topics. So without further ado, let's talk about you, if we may. Pravina, you happen to be on my left at the moment. Please give us a little bit of background on your history and how we come to talk to you in such a prominent role today.
Great, and thank you, Tim, and hi, Kay, and hi to everybody. So it's great to be on this call and to share some insights and have a good discussion. As I was saying to Tim before I joined the call, I said, we have an hour for this call, but Kay and I can probably talk on these topics for a lot longer. But back to your original question. In terms of how did I get to where I am today, I think if I go all the way back, my career has always been in financial services. So I started in the banking world, and actually retail banking, where I was frontline and trained to be a branch manager. So I sold life insurances and pensions and mortgages. And it was like having my own little shop, because you had every facet of running a business. and I was probably, what, 21 at the time. And looking back on it, and hindsight's always a wonderful thing, it's probably the best grounding I could ever have had. And then if I fast forward to today, one of the common threads in my career has always been, and I think about how I made choices, it was around a couple of pivotal points. Doing something I enjoyed. Now, clearly, we can't always do everything we enjoy 100% of the time, but it was about what motivated me. My primary purpose was, how could I make a difference and how could I make an impact? So I'm very clear, you put me into a job that doesn't require transformation or change or moving something forward, I will easily get bored. So how do we really create something for a purpose? And then thirdly, it was around people. So, I am convinced even to this day that people can go and do stuff anywhere and create stuff anywhere. But if you bring that together with a purpose, you bring it together with engaging your talent and your colleagues, I think we can really make an impact. And that is really prevalent today. And if I come to my job currently at Swiss Re, our purpose is about making the world more resilient. I couldn't think of a greater purpose to be behind. Especially if I now combine technology to that. So my team is a global team. We're roughly 5,000 across the world. And the easiest way of describing it is we look after all things tech. So everything from cybersecurity, data, application development, and our shared service centers. But really what we do is create solutions and services for our customers and clients. Now, when people think about insurance, they go, oh, that's really boring. Why would I want to go and work in reinsurance or insurance? But if I take a step back and I go, actually, what if I was to tell you we use our own models to create, analysis and information for our clients that tells them, based on the access to satellite imagery, flood data, other natural disasters, we could say your risk profile for your products and your buildings is X, Y, Z. How insightful would that be? Because we are helping society make better decisions. Equally, and as was the case in Hurricane Ian, what if we can use that data to say, let's pay out claims in an easier way so we get that funding to the people that at the time they need it and not X months afterwards. So really, that's the reason behind why I do what I do. It's about the purpose, the impact, the change, and the magic ingredient of people.
Lovely summary. Thank you, Rowena. Making the world more resilient is certainly something we need to be doing right now. And as we know, with the climate change ahead of us, that ability to forecast not just outcomes, but also behaviours when these outcomes, come to fruition is hugely relevant, of course, to everybody at the present time, particularly, of course, your customer base as well. Thank you very much. Kay, please tell us a little bit more about your journey so far.
Yes, absolutely. And listening to Pravina, I think that we share a lot of the common tenets of what we wanted to do with our careers. So I started my life as a barrister, and what I wanted to do was to effect change and help my clients on their life journey. And in many cases, and I'm a human rights barrister by background, in many cases, those people are relying upon you for huge changes that are going on in their lives. And so when people say, well, how did you get from barrister through judge and professor to what you're doing at the moment, it always feels to me that there is this golden thread of wanting to make the world a better place and wanting to help individuals succeed in the world. So as a barrister, you help individuals or small sets of individuals. As a professor, you are hopefully helping your students by imparting some small amount of wisdom to them to make good choices about their careers, to understand how to be good citizens, and really starting them off in their lives. And then in the work that I do now, you talking about responsible AI and helping businesses and countries with solutions around responsible AI. That's really sort of taking it to the next stage. That's me hoping that the necessary underpinnings that we have to have of responsible AI underneath AI to help everybody in the world succeed. So yes, so very similar. People giving back, making change. They've been core tenets of my career.
Thank you, Kay. If I may say, I see regularly one common trait of high-performing individuals that surpass what many may see as day-to-day potential, people like yourselves that really have stellar careers, is that they are driven by a higher purpose that guides their everyday actions, their everyday decisions, that are, certainly with that higher purpose in mind. And the higher purpose, as you say, has to have huge value, which I think both of you have demonstrated today. So it's lovely to see those higher purpose decisions coming through in your actions every day. Thank you. Really interesting, actually. So look, we get on to one of our first questions, which I think is hugely relevant and hugely topical right now, and certainly something that I think you probably both have experience of day to day. What is and what should be the role of diversity in the fast-paced environment of the emerging tech world? And what impact do you believe this would have potentially on the way that we work day to day? Praveen, I know you've certainly looking at some of the activities you have online. You have a lot of experience in the promotion of diversity within the workplace, and I believe also you do some mentoring yourself in order to help people move through this particular area. Can you give us some comments for us?
Yeah, certainly. So I think diversity and also more importantly, inclusivity are a commercial imperative. So for me, it's no longer a choice, or rather whether you do it or you don't, you have to do it. If you look at all the studies that are out there, it's financially proven it's more profitable for an organization to have diversity throughout its structures. Secondly, if you look again, you listen to outside-in information, they say for gender parity, it's going to take 300 plus years. We haven't got 300 plus years to do this. So for me, the key thing is it's not a debate anymore. It's a must-have. And I think more importantly, we all need to represent the societies we serve, which happens to be 50-50. So as any organization, how can you come up with products, services, solutions that don't reflect the community you serve? So there is an economic part to this, which makes total business sense. Now, the reality of it is it's only action that's going to drive that change. And I think all too often there is sometimes lots of talk and not enough action that results in impact. And that's why I think collectively we can make a difference. So some of the things that I would encourage, and some of the things that we do within Swiss Re are, for example, lead with inclusivity, because I think it's about all forms of diversity. As an example, you need to have, especially if you're talking about something like Gen AI and where it can have real value, that diversity of thought helps development of that product and how we interact with it. The other part of this is policies and procedures internally within the organization. So your maternity policies, your paternity policies, but also how we advertise a role. We always make sure our roles are advertised, not this has to be 100%, but between 80 to 100%. So we provide that flexibility up front. Secondly, the language you use in your job adverts. There are certain words which will apply to one audience versus another. So no surprise, we have a tool that you put the job descriptions through that alerts you to, if you write it this way, you are not going to get the target audience. So that's what I mean. You have to have practical things that encourage that diversity in the workplace. And then the last thing is, once you get these people into the organization or the thought into the organization, how do you make it inclusive? Now, my famous quote I keep saying to people is, it's like being invited to a party. You get invited, but if no one talks to you or engages with you, you are not going to go again. And this is really what we've got to do about creating that inclusivity. and asking people to speak up, inviting people. And that's where mentoring comes in. But it's mentoring and sponsorship. So finding the right mentors. And I think often you have to have more than one. And the other thing is you have to have the sponsors. So who's advocating for you when you're not in the room? So I think there is a commercial imperative. There is a how do we do more structurally to attract the right talent? And then it's that when you get the right talent, how do we nurture it, keep it, and grow? So I would break it into those 3 buckets.
And as you say, there does need to be proactive planning. These things don't happen by accident. It has to be thought through. I noticed you've mentioned before in some of your comments that it's essential to have a diverse recruiting panel when you're actually going through the interview process, and such basic common sense advice as this, I think, is something that companies should take on board. So no, thank you very much, Pravina. Kay, any thoughts from your side?
Yes, absolutely. And also I want to apologize for keep sipping my tea. It's 5 o'clock in the morning for me, and I'll be a puddle if I don't drink tea. So thinking about diversity, and specifically I think about AI, as that's the other topic that we're conquering today, or at least touching on. And one of the things that as Pravina says, that you really need diversity in your company, but you really need diversity when you're creating product. And if you're thinking about how, and Pravina's one of the few women in AI, when you're thinking about how you are creating an AI product, then you need to know that there are only about 22% of AI engineers who are female. And so the majority of people creating product are going to be young men, often under 30. And so it's really important when you're thinking about this diversity issue that if you're going to be creating something that is targeted at, old white ladies like me, then it's just the same as if you were creating a tangible product. Just because it's software, it doesn't mean to say that it doesn't have to be fit for purpose. And what we know is that not only does bias come in through the historical data, but also it comes in through the actual creation and the people who are creating AI. And so, that's another reason that we really need to be having diversity within the work that we're doing with AI. Pravina mentioned hiring. One of we've just had the EU AI Act, and one of the risky uses of AI is in hiring, because again you can get those biases coming through. And I think also then if we look at generative AI, we need to be aware that there are biases in the data that generative AI is pulling from if you're using the internet tool, the tools that draw from the internet, because actually the bulk of the data is not in the least bit diverse, because the bulk of the data, if you're talking about Western models, it has been drawn from items produced by white men, because they've had the pen for so much longer than we women or persons of color. So I think those are some things to think about. And just before we came into the conversation today, Tim and I were talking about my daughter, who's a pilot in the US Air Force, and diversity is even worse there. It's only 6.5%. So when we worry about diversity in AI, we can at least take some comfort for the fact that we're doing better than they are.
Yeah, the statistics there, I think, as you mentioned earlier, that your daughter is 1 out of 100 Air Force pilots. That is a sign that we have a long way to go, I think, in order to make things equitable, as you mentioned. Slightly diversifying, but on the same topic. One of the things that I've noticed from both your comments about this particular topic of generative AI is that fact that, as you say, the data is skewed somewhat. I noticed the United Nations General Assembly have just put a resolution to try and safe secure AI in some possible way. How do you see actions being required to make AI a safe and equitable tool as we move forward?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, I think there's two aspects to it. So clearly it's something, it makes it easier for all of us that are implementing these tools if there is some commonality of regulation. And commonality, understandability, and I would say clarity is really key, because sometimes regulations we've seen this before when the private and public cloud were a big topic. Sometimes regulation can be ambiguous and open to interpretation. So I think it is a good thing and we welcome it because it provides guidelines for us and makes our jobs much easier. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, from a usage perspective, I think it builds, I could say consumer in the broadest sense, it builds consumer trust. Because if you think of ourselves as consumers, if something has the kite mark, or it's been validated, or it's checked, how much more confidence do we have in using it, purchasing it, interacting with it? So within Swiss Re, we know we digital trust is key to everything that we do. And we have our internal governance processes, checks and balances, checking of models to make sure that conscious but unconscious bias is considered. So I think every organization has their own way of doing it, but digital trust has to come first. And there has to be alignment on digital trust, because when we say digital trust, people often think, oh, is it about the infrastructure safe? Or is it that it's the best technology? But if you ask a consumer what is digital trust, it's actually, is my data safe? Can I use it easily? Do I understand it? And that's where we're really focusing, to look at digital trust from a consumer perspective. And whether it's generative AI or some of our other solutions, making sure that we have that at the heart of how we develop. I think the last thing on generative AI, I think we all have to agree, it's still emerging. It's still too early to say. We all believe in it, and I think it's super promising. But I think we need to progress. We need to progress with speed, but with caution, because we don't know what we don't know yet, because it's still so new.
Yeah, very good point there. As you say, we don't know what we don't know, and I think that the next 4 or 5 years will be again quite transformative in how we start to use some of these applications, particularly. We've touched upon diversity there. I've been working in the tech sector since the late 80s, early 90s, so I've seen the worst and the best of diversity over the last 30, 40 years or so. How has your experience been of fighting your way through the tech sector as a woman? And is there any advice potentially that you could give to any talent watching this day today about any particular actions they can take to advance their careers and achieve their professional goals? Maybe some top tips from you as to the essential requirements of navigating the tech sector as a lady, which, as I've mentioned, we still have a very long way to go to find that equitable place. But what's your thoughts on some key actions that we could undertake away today? Kay, anything from your side?
Yes, certainly. Well, I mean, I would say that I have been lucky, so I'll be really interested to hear what Pravina has to say. Because I already fought my way through being a barrister at a time when there were not very many women as barristers. I think there were about 400 of us women and about 5,000 barristers. So I already fought that battle years ago. And, one of the benefits of coming to anything when you're more mature, I would say, is that you are already equipped with lots of tools to deal with these things. Certainly for me, the journey was more difficult simply because I was talking about responsible AI in 2014 when everybody thought I was completely mad. And so that was more difficult, getting people to listen to the message rather than to listen to me as a woman. But what would be my key takeaway? I think that for me, it's about passion. Pravina said earlier that you can't hope to do everything that you want to do in your career, but I certainly have always said I only want to be working on something that I wake up every day and I want to go to work. And so I think that if you've got that passion, it will help drive you through some of the problems. And I see it again in my daughter. There are obviously being one woman in 100-person squadron comes with difficulties, but if you're passionate about it and you want to do the job, then that will help you. And certainly if you've got mentors around you, that's so trying to build and making sure that you're insulated a little bit from some of those problems. But I also just wanted to go back to that data question, Tim, that that Pravina mentioned, because I think that it's so vital at the moment for companies to be thinking about customer trust. The Edelman each year create a barometer of trust. And this year, when they looked at AI, they found trust in AI falling like a stone in many areas. That's the audience, that's your customer that you're actually having to sell product to that is created with AI. And so, we obviously that's partly because of the emergence of deep fakes and things like that. But the public don't necessarily differentiate between the deep fakes and the disinformation on the one hand and the way that we're using AI tools in business.
And surely, I know from your from listening to you before, that there doesn't seem, for example, once you see something like a deep fake, surely there's no real positive ethical usage of that technology, and so by definition, doesn't it besmirch the AI name due to its nature? And as you've mentioned there, if we're losing trust with the core product, that surely has some implications for our future.
Yes, I think it does. And, I have said for a long time that we are at a pivotal moment at the moment, that we have to make sure that we take our citizens, our consumers with us on this journey. And it really appears that from certainly that test and also from Axios study last year that we are failing to do so. And it's so hard. It's so hard to tell a deep fake from a non-deep fake, and it's inevitably going to affect trust.
It's a good point, because when you think about in a corporate environment, when any of us deliver big projects or programs or technology change, they have to be accompanied by what I call change management. Now, if you think about the advent of Gen AI and how it's being used, there needs to be a global change management program that sits alongside us, that addresses the things you are talking about, because it's like anything, a new thing has been created. In this case, let's call it software has been created. So it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad, which is what you've seen. But I think the danger becomes if it becomes so marred with all the bad that we will lose the goodness it can create, which is why this leveling education, global change management is super, super key. And I think you're right, there's much more we can do around that.
Do you think the topic of the ethical applications of AI is advancing as quickly as the technology itself? Kay, are you being consulted more regularly on the ethical side of the area? Because we know that technology is moving at such a fast pace, but is the ethical discussion keeping up?
Yes, fortunately, this year, everybody's talking about responsible AI. Suddenly, I'm vindicated. And yes, there have been very many more calls. But of course, part of that spurred on by the fact that now we actually do have an act in place in the EU. And in America, we have the Biden executive order, and we're seeing legislation or requirements coming up around the world from different countries. And so certainly with multinationals, they're saying, oh gosh, there's all this different stuff coming up, and we've got to be compliant in all of it. But also nobody wants to be known, I think, as the company that didn't do responsible AI. And so finding that they need to do responsible AI, they are now making the calls. Yes.
Yeah, very good point. And Pravina, obviously in the reinsurance industry, you've mentioned AI is playing a big part, of course, in the digital transformation journey. You've mentioned a couple of obvious benefits there with regards to, for example, some of the climate change and forecasting actions. Is it emerging in other parts of the business? Are you seeing a very different position, for example, 5 years hence from where we are today with the use of the technology?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. But I think I go back to, we still don't know what else this technology will be capable of. So the key thing any organization has to be able to do is pivot and innovate and trial and test quickly. So where we are today, so yes, we can use it. If I look at it more broadly from the insurance world, we see usage and benefits in the underwriting space and in the claim space, and for organizations that have big contact centers. So there are definitely parts in the value chain where it has greater usage, and clearly in data analytics. But in the insurance industry, we've been using narrow AI for years. So it's, in that sense, it's the gen bit that makes it that more available, understandable, and more wide-reaching. So we use it in almost two buckets. One, like many organizations, how do we increase our own productivity as all employees, irrespective of the role you do? So I've made it available to all of my engineers, and we are looking at it. So if they can save time doing what they don't like doing, some of the boring code, they're freeing up some time to increase creativity. And with that creativity, either it's mentoring other people, spending that time to learn, or doing something that they wanted to do but never had time to do. So it's looking at it as a creativity pendulum versus an efficiency pendulum. And I think that's quite critical. And then in the business space, we provide many solutions to our clients today. So LifeGuide is one of our proprietary underwriting tools, which we give to many of our clients. Now, what we're doing is we're about to go to pilot where we've applied Gen AI to that tool, and we're going to give it to our clients, which means they can then do their underwriting much quicker and with ease. So I think that's why I'm saying we can talk about the broader of what this will do and won't do, but until you apply it for real and get that real insight, you're not going to learn. So I think that's why I keep coming back to what is the impact, what is the purpose, and then how do we quickly learn from that?
And I think, Tim, that, Pravina's in a completely different position from a lot of people, in that, as she says, she's been using narrow AI for a long time, and it was quick at pivoting, and has the team put together in order to be able to do that. That's not necessarily what we're seeing in a lot of companies. A lot of companies are still at that proof of concept stage with AI, or they have different AI solutions spread out all over the company, and the poor old CAIO or the CTO comes in and is brought in to do something with AI, and then they've got to work out which of these solutions are actually worth pursuing and which are not. So you have to do a mapping exercise of where there is AI. Lots of boards are not in any way sufficiently literate on AI to be able to carry out their functions. And so we're seeing gold standard with Pravina, but in many places, including, for example, hospitals across the US, where people don't understand generative AI, and they're still really just putting their toe in the water.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Pravina, something I was going to ask you, obviously being in such a privileged position, having the thought leadership on this particular topic, when you walk into a room, how often are you the solitary female in that room? Are you finding that there's still a lack? Because obviously our business is in the sourcing and recruiting sector as well. And certainly I still see a huge lack of female talent coming through in this particular AI field. Do you feel that there's still a shortage? And if so, how would you advise, particularly people in our sector, to try and attract more young females into this business?
So there's definitely a shortage. There were some stats I came across last week. So if you look at C-suite roles in general, we made progress. I think the numbers come out 20-30%. If you then hone in on technology type roles, it's more like 10 or 11%.
Yes.
So it's a massive challenge. But then I almost go, you need to look, it's like a pipelining effect. Where are we being more? So what should we do about it? We need to be more creative about how we grow, attract, and nurture that talent. And I think ultimately it actually does start at schools. So I know, because I've done a lot of work with schools, the intake to STEM is increasing. However, when it comes to career choices, many of the girls leaving school will go down the medicine route versus a technical route. So that's the first break point. Then the second break point in the journey is when they join an organization, if they don't see people like them or they can relate to, back to the inclusivity point, they don't seem to stay. And then, of course, throughout the career journey, there are various points in one's career that you decide, I'm going to leave or am I going to come back, whether that's maternity, caring, responsibilities, and career opportunities. So I think I really wish there was one silver bullet that would solve this for us, but it isn't. I think you have to, it's like any consumer customer problem. We have to have different treatments and remedies for every part of that end-to-end value chain of a girl's career. Now, earlier you asked the question of, how do I find it and how difficult or easy was it? It's tough. And I think we have to be honest about that, because sometimes, I know when I was going through my career, I'd see someone in a senior role and I go, oh yeah, it's all right for them. They've already made it. But it's tough. And every single day we will go through things that are challenging for us. So you can, even to this day, I can go to a conference or to a external engagement. I can be the only one person there. So there'll be little things that come up, or you spot something and you think, I now have the platform and the opportunity to correct that. So the key thing and the advice I would give is, so what do we need to do irrespective of where we are in our career journey? And I would say courage is the biggest thing. And I often say, when people ask me for careers advice, when they're moving from job A to job B, I say to them, how do you feel? And they look at me all puzzled. And I went, are you scared? And they'd say, yeah, I've got butterflies in my stomach. I said, that's exactly the reason why you should do it. Because what that is that you can do it, but we often are our own worst enemy, because we get so comfortable in our comfort zone that really we don't want to step out. So I think as individuals, and this applies to everyone, being more courageous, being more resilient, and knowing, do you know what? It's okay. Sometimes it might not work out, but there are other options. Is the one piece of advice I would really give. The other is feedback, is coaching, and get feedback, get it real time. Because we all have blind spots. You don't know what you're doing until someone points it out. And then you go, oh yeah, actually, do you know what? I know I do that. And maybe that's not helping me. So it is difficult. It is tough. But we have to be pragmatic and we have to be realistic. But I am 100% confident that we can make a difference.
Yeah,
yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just about going to add there that I think it's giving women opportunities to appear on webinars like this. Because if you're not seeing people who are in your company who look like Pravina and me, in senior roles, you can see us if we're doing webinars, if we're doing speeches, if we are being elevated. And one of the things I really loved about working for the World Economic Forum was that we had a 50% policy on our panels, so that we had to have 50% of the panel, not including the moderator, as women. And you know, that means that you are then putting women next to very senior men, and it's giving that exposure to women and allowing young women to see that you can succeed in those environments. That also really helps. If it's not happening internally, we must make it help externally as well.
Yeah, it's a really good topic, and I think something that you both mentioned is that concerns me is the accessibility to these movements in the right direction. I think, Pravina, you mentioned, 3 billion people still are not accessing the internet. That's a very concerning number, if you like, of people that will be missing out on what we know is a progressive movement. Obviously, I've been in the industry a long time, and certainly in the last 20 years, I think the progress we've made has been significant. By no means to the level that we need it right now, but we're certainly seeing more really positive actions. And we're seeing that heavily. I trade a lot in North America. We trade a lot in Europe. We trade a lot in India. Do you think that it's a global phenomenon that we're seeing at the moment, or that we still have challenges, if you like, to reach every corner of the globe to get the message across? You obviously travel extensively yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a global challenge, absolutely. But if I think about it, what we've also got to be cognizant as organizations who operate globally is every office reflects the culture of that country. So sometimes the change the organization wants to make or should be making in any different region, that might be counterproductive to what's normal outside in society. So that's the other thing that we often forget is we're very keen on, we have to have global policies, equal treatment, and fair and equity and inclusivity everywhere. But don't forget that the actions you take might have to be nuanced based on which region you're talking to. So as an example, I was let's just take UK, for example. I went to one of our offices in Manchester and I was talking about diversity. And the team looked at me there going, "Are you mad? We haven't got an issue. Look at the table." And because there we took a lot of intake from universities. And I went, "Actually, you're right." But because they'd never been outside that environment, they didn't know that this was a bigger challenge in some of our other geographies. I was in Asia end of last year. Again, we have a higher percentage of women coming into tech leadership roles. So because of the education system was encouraging everybody to go and get engineering degrees. So that's why I think you have to be balanced and take actions that are appropriate for every location that you operate in. But I do think it's a global challenge.
And I just want to add that one of the ways that I think that we can deal with that, specifically in this context with AI, is to, bring diverse teams around our product. So whilst the engineers might be young men, you can balance that by bringing other people into the room to ensure that there is diversity around that product, and that actually ends up with a better product. And so just because women are not being engineers, it doesn't mean to say that they shouldn't be part of the product creation team.
Mm-hmm.
I could agree. And it's interesting you mentioned that it starts at schools, Pravina. I know from having young children that the under 10 years of age generation really has a very different view, I think, today from where schools were when I was under 10, for example, for many moons ago. And but it's interesting that I'm seeing very positive change at that grassroots thinking level for young children now. But as you've mentioned, we haven't got another 20 years to wait in order for everybody to catch up. And it's certainly something that I know from also having an 84-year-old mum is that technology can be quite challenging, if you like, when you're in your latter years. So the generational gap becomes slightly wider and wider when you look at how much technology has changed in the last 10, 15 years. You mentioned that you do work with universities. Are you finding that the proactivity within universities to attract that real diverse attendee levels in some of these AI courses, are you finding that they're succeeding, or again that the percentages are slowly growing, or that we still have a sort of 10-20% female contingent? What's your experience of that so far?
I'd say it's growing, but it's slow.
Right.
Because
Okay.
and it could be because it's still very new. I think it's gathering more interest, and the real pivot point is, I go back to the why. People don't just want to go to coding school or AI school. They want to know, if I do this, what am I going to do with it? And I think the more the universities paint the so what of this technology, the greater appeal have to a wider audience. And I don't think that's something we've nailed yet.
And, if I think about it in the States, we've just, of course, had the Supreme Court decision, which went against diversity of applicants. And so I think at the moment, universities are sort of working out what the fallout from that is and how to manage that.
Yeah, it's a very big topic, I think, isn't it, for some of the universities, particularly when it's a shame. I think we fell at the last hurdle there. It would have been nice to have a little bit more governmental support along the way. So obviously you have positions where you certainly don't just look at day-to-day issues. You're looking at issues in the future as well. Do you have a vision for 5, 10 years hence, where AI and potentially diversity come together more? It certainly worries me, your comments that a large portion of the AI technology that I'm seeing at the moment is coming from Northern Hemisphere white male data input. Certainly, if you've ever walked into any room, it's certainly a more stimulating room when you have both sexes arguing about the pros and cons of any topic. So it would be a natural worry for me that any decision would be made purely with one section of society. Do you have a vision for 5, 10 years where the actions that we take today will get us quickly to a better place, not just technologically with removing some of that bias, but physically having 50% of each relevant sex in any one room at any one time?
I would say the speed of action needs to change for that to happen. So I would say maybe it's 5 years, it's probably 10 years, but the vision has to be, it needs to be the opposite of where we are today. So you have more diverse teams dealing with Gen AI, but other technology topics as well, because there will be other things that come along. But I think it starts with taking action that increases that diversity, working on any topic that is affecting the products and services of any organization. Because until we get to that 50-50, or as close to that 50-50 as possible throughout all levels of hierarchy, getting that the products that the consumers relate to is going to be hard. And so I think it's the speed of, so my vision would be having speed of action to change where we are today. Now, is it going to be achievable in 5 years or 10 years? I think it can. But I think the other part specifically to Gen AI is having a more balanced approach. Because I think we are in the danger of, it is the next new shiny toy right now. I cannot go to a meeting, at least once or twice a day where someone doesn't talk to me about it. So with anything, these shiny new toys, the shine could easily go off. So how do we keep the goodness of what's come out of this and then have the diversity to create it into something that appeals to our customers and clients?
And I think, Praveena's done a great job of thinking about it within the company, but I think we also need to think about it in terms of society. So do we want a society that where effectively thought is dominated still through by men, white male from the global north, because that's where the data is coming from? Or do we need to do something about it now? If we don't do something about it and people continue to use generative AI models based upon the internet, then we will simply perpetuate what we have at the moment. And that's going to get worse. There's a study that came out about a month ago that said that, we're going to be creating every day more data next year than we have created in the whole of the time that we've been creating data. So we're just speeding up. And of course, the problem with generative AI models that are based on the internet is that once they create an answer based upon the current data, it falls back into the data lake and can be used again. So we've got this sort of unvirtuous cycle. And so if I'm thinking about what we need to do between 5 and 10 years as a society, it's actually making some of those decisions that we need. And to come back to the plane analogy, which I tend to use a lot, in Star Wars and Star Trek, it's the people flying the plane. Do we want to be flying the plane, or do we want AI to be flying the plane? And that seems to be a fundamental conversation that we're not having.
So a fascinating one. I obviously grew up with Star Trek and Star Wars, and I was just saying earlier, when I FaceTime my mum, she still thinks it's like some wonderful device where we can see each other across, thousands of miles. But it's a point that maybe I'd like to finish up with. I'm obviously in a business where we recruit people all the time, and as you probably know, AI, for many people without maybe your level of understanding of the technology, many people are concerned about job replacement, the diminishment of opportunity within certain areas of the technology sector. I have the luxury of recruiting for probably 35 years now, and I think I placed a tape operator was my first placement back in the day. So I've seen that the job specifications that were in the late 80s, early 90s, even the job titles don't exist anymore compared to where we are today. You've mentioned they're obviously driving the plane, so using the tech to our advantage. Do you think there is a genuine concern that a substantial portion of our tech sector could be automated, replaced, or repurposed in some way? And do you think that the proliferation of new technology, which is coming through, day after day after day, will offset some of that normalization, if you like, of roles that are potentially, replaced by the technology?
And this is a huge debate around this at the moment, because clearly, when you talk about new technologies, immediately people say, what's the business case?
Yeah.
And this is a big topic. So there are lots of schools of thought that this is going to save millions for the industry, as a whole. But I have a slightly different view in that it's going to be, it depends, every organization is different, and it depends on your baseline. So yes, it will help us become more efficient. Yes, it will help us become more productive. But actually what it's really going to do is help us become more creative. And what I mean by that is it will automate some of the stuff. It will make things more efficient and easy to use and more accessible. But that then frees up time, capacity of all the things we all know we should be doing, but we're not doing. And I think that going back to my change management point, the more we balance out the story between, let's face it, new tech comes in, it's either cost savings or a revenue gain. That's the only way we're going to measure it. The more we balance the story of Gen AI between a cost exercise versus a revenue and a growth exercise, the better. So I think we should, because at the moment it's coming out pretty much one-sided. And so therefore I think if you say to a knowledge worker, because I think this is the first technology in a long time that is almost threatening the knowledge worker. And that's why we're having this debate. And I think the more we help educate, change manage for the knowledge workers to say, this capability is actually going to help you, the better and the greater the acceptance and the more creativity we get out of it. Because guess what? If we say we're going to put this in there, you're going to lose your job, it's going to have the opposite impact. So that sounds very real, but I think that's really the debates that are happening in many organizations across the world right now.
And I agree totally with Pravina. It's about the does this organization see it as an enabler for people to be doing something else, for people to be creating something that actually moves the organization forward in a different way? Or is it just about saving money? If you go into it about saving money, then of course you're going to see job losses. And in the legal profession, Morgan Stanley said that 44% of the jobs in the legal profession were at risk. And you can see that in the research areas, for example, in the drafting areas. But most of us want to talk to a person. And if you don't train those younger people to become the senior partners, then you're going to have a completely automated law firm. And is that what people want out of the law firm? It's the same with doctors. I have made no. I had breast cancer last summer, and so I am now seeing my oncologist. And the other day I went to see my oncologist, and she said, "Oh, AI, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an AI tool that would help walk you through your journey with cancer?" And I said, "No, it wouldn't. What would be wonderful is if the AI tool helped you take notes and do all of your administrative stuff so that you could talk me through my journey with cancer." And it's thinking creatively and how we can augment ourselves with AI rather than replace people.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a long time before I walk on a jumbo jet plane that has no pilot and would feel comfortable. We're not quite there just yet. But I think you're right, as an enabler, as an underlying product that will help make our society better. I think coming back to what you were saying earlier, to make the world more resilient, Pravina, to make the world a better place. If we stick to these underlying higher purposes and try and make every decision that we make, relevant to those purposes, then we will go in the right direction. But we do have, as you say, a number of steps to take, I think, in order that we get there. But if I may say, just as a final comment before we finish up, having people like yourselves in the world with these higher purposes, getting out of bed every day to try and make the right decisions with the best future in mind is what we need, and we need more of you. If we had 100 more of you, I'm sure we would be 100 times better off in the world. So please, if I may say, keep doing what you're doing. And to our audience as well, I'd encourage you to follow Pravina and Kay on LinkedIn, on the social media platforms, to keep up to date with some of the great works that they're doing, because both commercially, theoretically, and with the future in mind, you're both coming up with some thought leadership that's exceptional right now. So if I may, I'd like to thank you for being so inspirational in a number of areas, not just across AI, but of course across the diversity piece as well. Please keep doing what you're doing. We won't leave it 10 years to catch up, Pravina, to make sure that the changes that we make are on their way. But we will certainly come back and hopefully catch up in the next year or so, and see how our world has changed. Excuse my background noise there. It's been lovely seeing you today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will certainly leave some notes in the comments as to how you can potentially put excuse the background noise, some more questions to Kay and Pravina through my email address. Thanks, everybody, for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.